Well, good afternoon, everybody. I can't believe how many people here. This is really, really exciting for me. I've been with Tumblr. If Tumblr is about 8 years old now, I've been there for almost half that time. So I get to share some kind of cool perspective. I hope you find it valuable. I was there for the beginning of our really tremendous growth, and I was there for a lot of the challenges that happen when you go through that. So that's what I want to talk to you about, in fact. I want to share some of the great stuff that we've been doing, some of the hard things we've been doing. So I'm the senior IT systems engineer at Tumblr. I work on a fantastic team of engineers, and here's what we did. So I want to talk about, I want to give you some perspective. So Tumblr, life at Tumblr, what Tumblr's like, how IT fits in to that culture, because I think it's a little different. And then we'll get right into it. I want to talk about how Casper happened, because it took more than 2 years for anybody to finally say yes to this. And then the rollout, what it was like to roll that out. But I'm going to be focusing not on the technical parts of this. This isn't really going to be a technical talk. We're not going to be talking too much about the mechanics of making a policy or how to maybe brand self-service. Those are fascinating ideas, very relevant for any rollout if you want them to be. We're going to be talking about a little mushier topic of culture, of philosophy. But this is not going to be touchy-feely. This is a concrete conversation with, I hope, very specific things that you can take and make a difference in your organization. And at the very end, I'll talk about some of the bigger lessons I learned and a few questions that you can take out and ask yourselves in your own environments. All right, so if you're going to know about what it's like to work at Tumblr, you're going to have to know a little bit about Tumblr itself. How many of you actually have a Tumblr? Oh my God, awesome, all right. Well, I'll catch the rest of you up, you're not that far behind. Like, let's say 60 seconds of Tumblr. This is your dashboard when you log into your account. And the idea behind Casper, its raison d'etre, is to make it effortless to share anything. Photos, video, music, links, chats like he said, she said. And to do it in any way you feel comfortable doing it. There's obviously a browser, but there's a phenomenal iPhone app and Android app. I think there's a Windows app still, Windows Phone app. You can do it from email. There's actually a phone number you can call to leave an audio recording that will post to your Tumblr. Really just whatever we can do to make it effortless for you to share. And then you can customize it to any degree you want to. Get right down into the HTML and CSS if that's your thing too. And so this platform of this platform of effortlessly sharing has built, many of you probably know this, incredibly diverse communities on Tumblr. Creative communities of every flavor. The classics of drawing and painting and singing and music are there, but all of these other ways of sharing are there too, and some of them are deeply inspiring, some are heart-wrenching. It's a really cool, really great environment, and we're very, very proud, if you can tell. And it's built by engineers. These are not classically considered creative types, but at Tumblr they really need to be. I think a lot of places they need to be, but at Tumblr particularly because effortlessness doesn't come easy. Easy may come easy, but effortless is a different beast. So we need to find ways of finding and keeping that creativity amongst a group of people that are very focused on algorithms and that sort of thing. So number one, we surround ourselves by it. Our office manager / incredible interior designer sources all of the art on all of our walls from Tumblr. She produces it, gets it framed, and we're surrounded by it. Every conference room, every hall, we look at it, and you like it or you don't, but you're forced to kind of acknowledge that this is what we're doing. But you can't just find some engineers and make them creative. You really have to find the creative ones. So going all the way back to the hiring process, like if you go to tumblr.com/jobs and you look through the engineering roles, even the non-engineering roles, you'll see a couple of bullet points repeated often. Like we want people that love to learn and love to teach, sort of two sides of that coin, and the humility that comes along with that, and the process that comes along with that. And then I think underneath all of this, though, is this idea that we each, I certainly feel like I have some pretty, I'm very interested in my ideas, but I don't know if they work out. You know, I can't just think through them in my head. I want to put them out there and share them. but it's a scary thing to do. And the more passionately you feel about something, the scarier it is to put it out there. And so when I'm surrounded by people that make room for that, that intentionally make room for different, amazing things can happen. So this is a picture of our bathroom on the bathroom door in our event space on the ground floor. And our facilities team stenciled this on the door. It's adorable. But there are people taking selfies in front of it. It's important because there are absolutely people at Tumblr that don't feel like they fit into those two categories on the left. And so we make room for them. We specifically make room for them. This is, for example, where you pee. So anyway, that's what it's like to be at Tumblr. And we're really, really proud of it. Now, if that's what it's like to be an engineer or creative or in the community team at Tumblr, the IT team needs to knit into that. And you can imagine sort of the kind of IT that we talked about 5, 10 years ago really not working with that sort of mentality. In fact, let's talk about that a little bit. IT, I think we can all agree, is classically technology-driven. We all love it, right? That's why we're involved in it, but at least to a degree. But as that scales, as your organization gets larger, as our organization got larger, you start focusing on managing that technology, of corralling that technology. You talk about managing workstations, finding efficiencies, places that you can stop repeating the same processes with your technology, the extent of your exposure in terms of security, trying to rein that in and control it, and of course, hopefully, ease of use. Are we providing easy tools for everyone to use to get their jobs done? That's all very normal. I think we've all had those conversations more than we can count. Left unchecked, though, this idea that technology is the beginning and the driver of everything in IT leads down a dark path. We start talking about control a lot. We didn't mean to, but we are now. We're scared that there's stuff out there that we can't control, and what is that exposure? And we end up, if we're very good at our jobs, building this menu of things that you're allowed to do. And you come to me with this brand new idea because you know how to use Google and you're really good at your job, and I'm left saying, oh, no, sorry, no, it's not on our list. It's a terrible position to put IT in. It's an awful position to put the rest of the company in, especially if you are finding really creative people that are passionate about what they do and are bound and determined to find a way to do it. It gets worse, though. So if you're driven by technology and if your goals end up becoming just down the road control, you end up isolating yourselves from the organizations that you're a part of. And I think, I'll bet all of us know what that feels like. I'm not part of the solution, I'm not part of the product, I'm propping up the organization. And it builds resentments. It builds resentments on the IT team. It also builds resentments from the people that we're helping. It's very, very difficult to build trust in that environment. You can build personal trust, like, oh, I think Jess is great. She does a really great job. I like her, but, IT. It's harder, it's almost impossible in this kind of environment to build trust between teams, to say, see, people may like Jess, but it's hard to get anything approved, or IT takes forever, or they don't respond to tickets. Those sorts of trust are difficult to build. And if you can't do that, you're not really ever going to solve any new problems. So that would fail miserably where I'm from. So we do things a little bit different at Tumblr, and we have from the very beginning, almost by necessity. This is a buzzword that I've seen in the last year or two, which I'm thrilled to have a word for this. I'm glad we have a word to have a conversation about. I hate the word user, though, so we're going to call it Peoplecentric. We practice people-centric technology. We love technology, of course. It's a lot of fun, but the people are the reason. So what does that mean? For us, it means we don't have users. We have colleagues in our case, which is amazing. These are fellow engineers. They're fellow people on the staff that have a lot of the same passions that we do. Our default position with our staff is to trust them. Not blindly, of course, but we trust that they're phenomenal at what they do and that they have some really cool ideas about how to do it and that they're there to talk about it and to share. And then speaking of sharing, this is a critical part of IT at our organization, sharing. Not just your personal stories with the people that you're working with, but as a team, sharing our goals, sharing our vision, especially sharing our failures and the steps that we took to correct them, or didn't take to correct them. Being a part of the organization means being a part of the organization. Sharing is critical. And I think that makes us, in a very meaningful sense, a part of Tumblr. We aren't building the platform that you're using to post to your dashboard, but we are nurturing that individual expression amongst our staff that our staff is doing for the rest of the world. So that's Tumblr. It's probably long-winded, but that's what it's like to be there. And that's how IT fits in. Now, I joined 3.5 years ago. When I joined, it was 2 of us supporting about 80 computers and 80 people. And like a lot of you, we did everything. Like if it plugs in, we were supported it way beyond that. So there were 80 people with 80 Macs, and everybody had a different version of software because our default answer is to say yes and to trust. And we had a bunch of conference rooms with a bunch of AV equipment, and then we had 2 internet connections and a wired network and a wired. It was all us, and it all had to be now, and it all had to be yes. When I first got there, that was a problem. And so one of the first things I did when I joined Tumblr is say, you know, there are some levels of efficiency we could find here. And I think managing our fleet would be a very good step, and Casper would be a great match. And I was shut down before I could finish the sentence. It was stunning to me. I thought, this is such a great idea. Everybody's going to love it. And they were terrified. They would not talk about it. I had some great managers, and we couldn't make any progress. So a year and a half later, it's the same deal, only now we're not at 80, we're at way over 200. That does not scale. And so I was pulling my hair out. I felt like I was on exactly the same page, that me controlling my fleet is a terrible approach, that it will not only ruin the computers, but it'll ruin the culture of the company and the attitude that people have towards their jobs. But I could not apparently communicate that. So I had to do some soul searching. I was getting resistance from everywhere too. It wasn't just management. Management, I think, was concerned. They had a hard time articulating this, but I think my managers were concerned that even with the best of intentions, this IT team was just slowly but surely going to take away responsibilities, all for good reasons, but take away the responsibilities and some of the abilities of the staff in the guise of security or efficiency. That's an easy slope to slide down. And the problem is that we're trying to find really talented and also very creative engineers and everyone else. They're hard to find. They're even harder to keep. And so this starts to matter a lot. If people feel like they're losing control of their destiny at the company, they'll find another job on the way out the door. So it actually matters. This isn't sort of trying to be benevolent and nice people, which we are, but it really matters to the business of Tumblr. From my colleagues, it was darker. They were concerned. So a lot of us had been there when there were 50, 60, 70, 80 people, and we're still there, and now there are 200 some. I don't know all the names. I barely know all the faces. It was starting to feel like a corporation, and everybody, so many people were waiting for that shoe to drop. Silently, we weren't really talking about it, but every once in a while, like I'd be at lunch, and somebody would say something like, so you guys can see everything on our computers, right? We've all had that, right? And the answer was a terrifying no. I can't, I mean, even if I wanted to, I can't. I can't see what version of Flash you have. It could be 5 years old. You could be infected with everything, and I wouldn't know. But that doesn't make them feel any better. And then the other question I got was, or observation really, is what they thought it was, that so eventually, I mean, was it going to be this year where you guys take over? Because at my last place, they would tell me that they used something to kind of manage the Macs. They were really nervous. They were waiting for the day when we went from cool, quick startup, nimble startup to like cubicles in a corporation, as though it were an inevitable outcome. None of that was true. I didn't want any of it to be true, but it didn't matter. I wasn't able to start a narrative around it. So I had to address this. We had to address this. Otherwise, I was never going to get Casper, and I was going to pull all my hair out in the process. So here's what I did. I started listening and letting them finish their stories. Up to that point, they would say, oh, at my last place, we used to do that. I would say, oh, yeah, oh, that's terrible. And I would interrupt them with how bad it could be. And that wasn't working, because 3 or 4 months later, I'd be at the same lunch table or in the same stairwell with the same people, listening to them tell the same narrative about how, well, yeah, but it's inevitable. So I would let them finish their stories. And in the end, when they were done, I would tell them some of my experiences and how it knitted. Oh, yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah, tell me more about this. And when I was done with that, I would say, well, that was a bad idea. There's a better way to do it, or there's a different way to do it, and here's my story. This is how I wanted to fill this in. I had to pull that old narrative out before I had to replace it with something. You can't just pull it out. By the way, are there any Apple geniuses, ex-Apple geniuses, or Apple specialists? Yeah, these are the 3 A's here. My wife figured this out. She works at the Grand Central store. What is that? Acknowledge, align, and assure. Awesome. Really works, by the way. But to do this, I found, in addition to listening, I needed to start using different words. Literally change some of the words that I was using. Here's some examples. These are used, we'll use these 100 times today, and I'm not going to speak disparagingly about them, really, because they're hard not to use. Let's start with the word user. User. How many of you have been called a user? I wrote a letter to Apple a long time ago saying, when I was in college, saying I'd love to work there, and they called me a power user in their response, and I was crushed. User is it's dismissive. It doesn't mean to be dismissive. It's this easy to use category. That's why we use it. We're not trying to be jerks, but it is. Worse though, and this ended up being, I think, part of my problem. I don't make any emotional connection to that word. Nobody does. You can't. It's not helping me with when I talk to my manager. Oh yeah, our users are really gonna. There's no connection at all. So I struck that. Very quick, very early when I started getting resistance to Casper, I started looking for different ways to talk. And so we struck user, and I tried to replace it, and it's hard to do, turns out. There's no good substitute for user that works in every case. Every word that I found that meant user in every single case had all of the same problems. So we didn't. We have staff, we have engineers, maybe you have faculty or students or people on the 9th floor. But it meant that every single time I was talking about them, I had to give a little thought, which is not easy. I don't want that to sound trivial. But doing the work is worth it. It turns out, number one, I can make an emotional connection when I'm trying to sell Casper, when I'm trying to pitch Casper. I say, oh, the engineers, and I'm going to be able to do this for them. We know engineers. I just had a meeting with engineers. That's going to be, JB or somebody. It's a connection that you make without having to work at it, right? The other thing you get for free is context. You're just using engineers as an example. I just know, because I've been at Tumblr for a little while, that our engineers are going to need 16 gigabytes of RAM, which is going to mean MacBook Pro. Now, that's not necessarily relevant in every single conversation, but it might be more relevant than you think in some of them. You start to when you stop using the word user, when I stopped using the word user and started describing the people I was talking about, I started making connections I hadn't made before in tons of conversations where I wasn't making them before. Same thing with management. Management was an early one to strike. Everybody doesn't want to use the word management. I think everybody in this room has heard some argument against using the word management. Unfortunately, that's what Casper is. And a lot of these solutions, mobile device management, workstation management, but nobody wants to be managed, even if that's not what you meant. That's what my bosses heard, that's for sure. That's what they were afraid of. But the other thing I discovered when we struck the word management is that, again, there's no real good substitute for management. Looking for another word, we sat on services because we just needed to move the conversation forward. And something kind of miraculous happened. When we stopped focusing on the word management, we stopped focusing on the task of management. Management is like maybe 15% of what we use Casper for. We make apps available, and self-service is a big part of it. And there's no meaningful sense of management in that. Services, when we started broadening from management, we started finding other ways of doing our job, finding other ways to be useful and helpful. So anyway, substituting words, finding new words was big. In the end, we were successful. obviously. we went with Casper. And the reasons were manifold, but I think the biggest one, the driver, was this idea that we were going to be able to provide software installers to people all throughout the company very easily through self-service. And that was a nice way of encapsulating this newer approach to what we were doing. It says, not only are we not going to take authority and autonomy away from our staff, there's a way that we can give them more. They no longer have to depend on us, for example, to get software. Faster, easier, asynchronous, but it was this nice little package of new. This is not what you think. This is something new. And then there were some, the rest of these sort of resonated with our management, our managers and security. If it's true for our remote staff, or for our local staff, it's even more true for the people that don't live in the building, work in the building, getting software and getting help. So our remote staff was a big seller. Security events, every once in a while, there's one of those, oh geez, GitHub was hacked, were you affected? And we didn't, it was hard to tell if you can't see your fleet. And then File Vault 2 was something we were enabling, and we were really worried that people would forget a password and then lose all their data. And one thing I didn't put up here, which I really should have, another selling point was when this was happening, Tumblr and Jamf were really close to the same size of employees. And what was really nice is I could tell my manager, hey, this is how I want to use Casper. This is the new kind of way of thinking about IT. And I could then point to an example. Jamf does a lot of the same work that we're doing and has for quite some time, this idea of a person-centric IT and enabling. So I wasn't trying, I could convince very easily, with an example, I could convince my manager that I'm not trying to bang a nail in with a screwdriver. Casper does this for the company that writes it. That, I think, was a big selling point. I should have put that up there. All right, so moving on. We sold it, it was gonna happen, and it was gonna be complicated. We were around 270 max at that point. We had a bunch of technical debt. We weren't that old a company, but we had grown very quickly, very organically, and you make the best decisions you can with the information at hand. So for that reason and a few others, the rollout was going to be very manual. Casper, as a lot of you know, has a lot of different ways of automating a rollout if you can take advantage of them. Unfortunately, and I'll get into this in a minute, we really couldn't for most of our fleet. And then, of course, after saying no for 2 years, it was, well, we really need it. Can we have this next week? Which was really exciting, but also a big problem. So for the rollout, we had goals, of course. Technical goals, I kind of been over this already, providing the apps and self-service, and then a lot of security concerns are some of our technical goals. But we also had cultural goals. And I need to say this, these were primary citizens in every conversation we had about the architecture of Casper and the design of the rollout and self-service and all of that. These could have changed the architecture. These could have been blockers. These were taken very seriously. I would have insisted on that because I feel very strongly about that, but it was a directive from above which made it a no-brainer. So number one, do no harm. This is a first impression, and like all first impressions, you get one. We have a lot of very talented people who are more than capable of discovering pseudo Jamf remove framework on the internet. And I can't have them doing that, or it's not doing me any good. So it had to be perceived at worst. Rolling this out had to be seen at least as useless, like not in the way. It can't break anything. I don't even want like 5 people to discover that, geez, as soon as they installed this, my processor started spiking and I think it was this, so I uninstalled it. If that's a seed that I can't really unplant. It's very difficult. So do no harm. Don't make anything worse. And number 2, be perceived as useful. People need to be able to see, oh, yeah, that, and immediately. It can't need an explanation. There can be explanations for some of this stuff, but there has to be something in there that somebody can say, that I could use that. That's pretty cool. I didn't have that before. They're looking out for me. And also, and this was key, by a clear majority of people. Because here's what's happening. Right, I don't have any delusions that people are spending their lunch talking about IT, but if you're going to introduce something that's going to impact, that feels like a large impact to the organization, it's going to come up. Now, what are they going to say? Hey, did you hear IT? They're going to be rolling out this stuff. What do you think? Now, a lot of people have a narrative about that. They've all heard stories, or they've even worked someplace where the IT team took over. That's poison, and it's not true. But the fact that it's not true doesn't matter if that's the narrative. So we had to find ways to be perceived as useful by a majority. There were some options. Casper makes a lot of these available. We could make software installers available, for example, in self-service. Configuration profiles can be self-service. The scripts through policies that run scripts. Great. And then there were the plugins. And during my jumpstart, I remember them telling me about the plugins. And I thought, all right, yeah, I'm going to give them some bookmarks in self-service. Sure, that'll be useful. Let's move on to something more interesting. But now I'm under a really tight deadline. I have 2 or 3 weeks to set up my entire infrastructure, figure out how to make it useful, build all of the stuff to do it. I don't have a lot of time, and I've never done this before. So what are we going to do? Software installers, some of them are easy. 1Password is a pretty easy one. Browsers are easy, but I work for an internet company. I don't think they need browsers. So Microsoft Office is kind of complicated to deploy. The Adobe Suite, I didn't even want to touch out of the gate. Remember, do no harm. It's better to not have an installer there than to have it break something. So I had very limited, I couldn't have a very full storefront with just software. Configuration profile is a possibility, but again, I needed to be able to try it out, and I wasn't going to have a lot of time to test, to debug. Scripts were the same problem. And again, remember, I don't know my fleet at this point. I guessed that we went back to early 10.7 at this point, all the way to current 10.8, but we might have gone back to 10.6 on a few workstations. I didn't know, and half this I can't do with that. I can't roll a script out and have it accidentally remove stuff on 10.6 because I didn't know they were running it. So the one that I was poo-pooing, the plugins, ended up being my savior. Here's a plugin. For those of you who haven't set up a plugin, it's super easy. 30 seconds if you have never done it before. Just a title, a description if you want. The kind of plugin we used, a URL plugin. You can give it an icon, and then you can tell it whether you want it to open the default browser when you click this thing in the sidebar, or if you want it to render inside of the self-service in WebKit, kind of like Safari. So we built a couple of those. It turns out that every week, we do this, we have our all-team meeting on Fridays, and every week we stream it, and every week at 2 or 3 minutes to go time, when we've got everything going, I got the stream going and mics, we have to get the levels right and feedback, and everything's happening, the entire IT team is really busy, we get 3 or 4 people that can't remember the link. And it's the same link, and it's a memorable link, but it keeps happening, right? This is life. We can put that out there. This is brilliant. So we did that. And we put it right, we actually had the stream right in self-service, one of those. So here's our initial self-service. It's kind of bare bones, but we had our software and then a couple of plugins. The other plugin, by the way, was to our resources page, which again was very easy to remember, very easy to bookmark, and nobody did. So that was there. This is cool because you could watch the stream right in not your browser. You could keep browsing whatever you were doing, and this was someplace else. So that was how to be useful for us in like a week and a half. So pretty cool. It's time for the rollout. For the rollout, we were going to do a quick add package, put it on a USB drive, and visit everybody for the most part. We did have a small percentage of our fleet that had ARD. These were older computers back when we thought, oh yeah, we're totally going to use, and we didn't. We also had the same idea. We tried Monkey very early on when I was, right before I started actually. There was this tiny attempt to do Monkey. Very cool solution. We couldn't do it, and I won't get into why. So for everyone else, it was going to be visiting. And that means 2 minutes or so to get them on chat, 2 or 3 minutes to get to their desk, a couple of minutes for them to close up and get the USB drive in there and start installing, and then what is it, 3 or 4 or 5 minutes to get enrolled and recon and get the inventory taken. So you're at 10 minutes easy. And that's if you, like smooth as silk, got this machine running. So that's, and 75% of over 270 computers, more than 60 of which weren't in the same time zone. So that was our rollout. The next part is the announcement. The sharing part was really important. So we're ready to go. We've figured it all out. Everything's built. It's time to tell everybody what we're doing. And there were 3 main points to this. This was very important. This is telling the company our new narrative. Number 1, we told them what they will be able to do now. That was highlighting the fact that we were not only taking away abilities, but we were adding to them, and we thought that was valuable. Number 2, things that we'll be able to do. This is a tricky one because For example, I'll now be able to update your Flash plugin for you, and I think that's very valuable. Some people will find that valuable. Some people will find this invasive for whatever reason. That's valid. I don't know why you'd want the old one. We don't have any business needs for them, but if you feel it's invasive, I now have a problem. But there are things we can do that are helpful to them. We could, for example, get a fleet picture. We knew how many computers were over 3.5 years, 4 years old at this point. We didn't know that before. We could only guess. We can look at that, figure out what our new policy is for rotating computers, and start upgrading computers. That's something they all want, and we can do that for them. And then the last thing is the elephants in the room. Things we won't be able to do that they think we're going to be able to do, because that's life. We can't, for example, copy your data off of your computer with Casper. It's not a functionality that's built into the platform, and we like that. I don't need the data off of your computer, and there are better ways to do it. I can do pretty much anything on your computer now, but it's audited. It's logged. We care about that. I don't think really anybody's going to do anything nefarious. They might, but they probably won't. But we will make mistakes, and now we want to be able to track that and figure out how not to do it again, who did it, and how they did it, and all that. So we tell them that. And we got applause. We were so excited about that. We took a company of people that were terrified that we were going corporate, that we were losing that nimble startup mentality, and we had them applauding for Casper, which was cool. And then we were delayed. It had nothing to do with Casper. I think it was our wireless network. I don't remember anymore. So what we had told them is, we're going to be visiting you. Stand by for more information. We'll stop by and we'll introduce you to it. We'll get you enrolled. And so we were delayed for a day and then another day. And nobody noticed because they just assumed we hadn't come to them yet. And then another day. And it ended up being about a week and a half that we were delayed with the rollout. And something amazing happened. Totally unplanned. The first time it happened, I was walking down the staircase, and I walked past somebody that I knew and said, "Hey, how you doing?" "Oh, yeah, we're good." And as the person walked past, they stopped, they turned around and said, "Hey, last week you talked about Casper, when are we getting that self-service thing?" I couldn't believe it. I had so many conversations with people in the year before this happened of them dreading anything of the sort, and now they were asking for it. And they wanted those plugins. It wasn't changing the world that they wanted. It was a nice way to do something they had a problem with all the time. It was pretty cool. This happened over and over again. It happened to me probably a dozen times, and everyone on my team kept hearing this, "Are you coming to me? Are we going to do this? Are you doing this tomorrow?" And we had to start saying, "I'm sorry, we were delayed. I didn't know you'd notice. Oh my gosh, we'll be to you later this week." And so when it came time to roll it out, to a person, everybody was there for us. They would break out of meetings early. They would schedule around us. They would cut their lunches early. If they were in another time zone, they would wake up early or stay up late. They bent over backwards to make time for us. And it had a very meaningful impact on our rollout. Again, I was under a huge deadline. We were under a huge deadline to get this done, and we were now a week and a half back on something that I said was going to be 3 weeks, and I thought that was optimistic. So our expected timeline for this was 3 weeks, 80%. I put a star there because I had to wink at my manager every time I said that, because I thought that was really aggressive. We'll try, I kept saying. And then everybody in essentially about 2 months, the people that were just hard to get a hold of, especially the people that were remote. That isn't how it went. The actual times, we were 95% rolled out in 2 weeks. Stunning outcome. Very, very, and we had full-time jobs doing all of the stuff that I've mentioned already. And we were completely rolled out every single Mac at Tumblr in 3 weeks. We beat our original deadline of 80% in 3 weeks. It was a huge win for us. And so I was really excited about that. So what did we learn? I learned that it's time for IT, it's past time for IT to admit that we have a meaningful and I think a substantial impact on the culture of the organizations that we support. We may not be directing the company towards whatever they're doing, but we have 1,000 interactions a day. And it's a constant opportunity to change the way we feel about each other and the work that we do. Humans think in words. We do. Look it up. It's amazing. You can change the way you think by changing the words that you use, and it really matters. So choose them carefully. I was shooting myself in the foot with the wrong words. With the right words, I was on the same page. I would encourage everyone to encourage self-expression, whatever that means. At Tumblr, that actually means stickers on laptops. And this is going to be recorded for so far posterity. We love that. But it's a pain in the butt to get those stickers off the laptops when it's time. But we don't let them, we encourage it. We even give stickers away sometimes. But that sense of ownership that you feel when you label it as yours means something. It's powerful. They're in charge, which is empowering. And then lastly, find any and every opportunity for your IT team to share in the organization. If there are weekly meetings and people are talking about goals, talk at them. If you don't have goals, make some goals. Tell them you're going to make those goals, and then make them. And then talk about how you made them. Talk about how you missed them. Contribute. If there's a newsletter you can be a part of, or if you can make your own, whatever it takes, be a part of the companies that you're, the organizations that you're a part of. Lastly, these are a couple of questions I asked myself, and I thought they were really helpful. Remember that it can just be useful. But if they don't recognize that as useful, you don't really get anything for it. Make sure it seems useful too. Spend some time on that. And then remember that there'll be chatter, especially for the big changes. And how can you shape the narrative a little bit? Help them tell a different story if you're trying to tell a different story. So that's culture at Tumblr. And I hope you find it helpful. This is me. That's my Tumblr. Ping me there if you're interested. And thank you very much. I'll take some questions now. Oh, thank you. Give me a break.
You said that the management that you experienced some negative reaction, not just from colleagues, but also from management. How did you try to deal with not just a negative reaction, but maybe some amount of apathy, where they just didn't hear it, they didn't care?
Oh, wow, that's a great question. So in addition to the negative reactions that I was getting when I was trying to tell people that Casper would be a good idea, like my management, how did I deal with the apathy? I'd forgotten about that. That was a huge, huge part of it. One of the things that my colleague and I at the time had done is we were seasoned IT veterans, and we were doing a pretty good job. And in that sense, it was hard to sell it as necessary because it was hard to find a place where we weren't executing. Why do we need to spend the time and risk the impact to the culture and the perceived culture of the organization when you're already doing a good job? We don't need it. That was a really tough one. There wasn't a really good answer to that. In the end, it was telling a new story. I needed to show them that there were things that they could do if I could do this that they can't do now, that they would find valuable. And the easy one was the packaging of software and self-service. That was a nice story to tell, that they're going to love that they don't have to get a hold of us. I left this out. There was a cheat here, but I took advantage of this, so I take full credit. We were pressured for security reasons to be able to answer certain questions. All those security, like being able to change passwords, being able to manage file vault, those had become recent mandates. And that's when I got to say, you didn't care, but I was talking about this for a year and you didn't care, and now you care, let's do it. This is how you do it. So as soon as I found some interest in anything possibly related to it, remember when I talked about this? That's what I'm talking about. And then I hope my passion helped. I don't know, but I hope my excitement did. How about back row?
Did you guys use your regular people to bring contractors into the deployment, just like your SysAd?
So did we bring in contractors for the rollout and just for the rollout? Did we bring out? No, we didn't. We did have an intern, so maybe the answer is sort of. He was great. If you're watching, he was really great. But we didn't bring outside people in. In retrospect, we probably should have considered it. Yeah, bringing in consultants might have changed perspective. Yeah, how so? How do you think?
Oh, no, I mean, like if you have somebody you don't know, and you're tasking with USB, hey, I finished the computer. That's a different thing than just like the guy.
Very good point, actually. So he just said if we just for the rollout brought in external help, and my entire company saw somebody they don't recognize coming up to their computer and doing something, you're right. That would have had, I think, a very meaningful impact. I don't think it would have gone over very well. The best we could hope for is that they didn't care too much. Yeah, good point. All right. Front row.
I'm interested to hear how your use of Casper environment has evolved since you got 100% deployment. Are you deploying more patches now? Have you begun using other tools like remote imaging, things like that?
Great question. So how has our Casper instance evolved since we rolled it out? There was a period of about 3 months where nothing changed because we were so relieved to have it in place, and a lot of learning happened. But since then, we have been refining how we use it. We work with our security team. We have a great InfoSec team, phenomenal, and a great relationship with them. So we've started using Casper to gather intelligence about our fleet and share it with them so that we can figure out what to do. The nice thing about that, by the way, has been having the ability to see what versions of plugins we have, for example, and figure out if we need to respond. Our assumption before we had Casper was that, oh God, we really need to be pushing stuff out all the time to make things secure. And it turns out that once we had the ability to measure what was out there, we could tailor our response and often temper our response. So this idea that eventually we were going to have to be pushing software on people, even though we didn't want to, ended up really not being true all that often. So there's a lot of that kind of learning. And then what else do we do? We aren't imaging with it yet. We were using Deploy Studio before that. We're still using Deploy Studio. That is going to change. My colleagues out here, that is one of our goals this year is to start using Casper imaging. Deploy Studio has been great. We're just hoping to use DEP, the device enrollment program, for some stuff. The other thing I think that's evolved is on the few occasions where we've pushed software, very few, I think we can count them on one hand, when we've forced everyone to have something. They were significant security events. There was a bash vulnerability back in the spring, I think, that was terrifying because there was sort of a lot of information about how it affected Linux, and it wasn't good. And we didn't know for the first like 24, 48 hours what the impact was on the Mac platform. And we're a bunch of engineers that compile software, so bash is used all of the time in our environment, indirectly. So again, we worked with our security team to figure out what our response was going to be, and our answer was to take. There was an open source patch. There was a patch to the open source bash that was available later that day from some third party that got some of those vulnerabilities fixed, and we were able to patch that up and push it out. And actually do it very invisibly. It doesn't really get in the way. So we got to shape our first significant push, not only in terms of our process of how do you compile and how do you package it up and how do you push it, but also the communications around it. We sent out an email saying, okay, everybody, there's been a very significant vulnerability discovered. We're not sure of the impact of it, so we are taking proactive steps to mitigate it. We've got this one. We're going to push it out. There should be zero impact on you. You will see a notification. We use the notification center notifications when it's happened. And let us know if you have any problems. So that was our first time communicating that, sorry guys, I know we're supposed to be hands off, but this is one we can do for you. And it was actually very well received, very, very exciting. We did the same thing with a Firefox vulnerability fairly recently. There was a huge Windows vulnerability. Weren't sure if it affected the Mac or how. If there was one, it did affect the Mac, but if there was an exploit in the wild. And again, same sort of learning how to craft the communications around that. In this particular case, it was the same sort of email that went out, and then when we were done, we sent out that same notification. And we probably can't swear, right? No. So anyway, it's a meme on Tumblr. If you're really excited about a Tumblr, like if this one of my favorites is a Tumblr on fluid dynamics, and it's super nerdy. It's all these like animated GIFs of like super cool fluids doing stuff, and the person who writes for it is really passionate. But it's not just fluiddynamics.tumblr.com. It's fya.fluiddynamics.tumblr.com. So there's, you get the nerdy passion in there. So anyway, when we rolled out our Firefox update, when we sent that little notification out saying, hey, Firefox is up to date, you're good to go, we did hashtag FEI in there to kind of brand it a little bit. And that worked really well. We had somebody tweeting about it on our staff saying, Tumblr IT is awesome. It goes a long way, to build that trust and build that relationship. Does that answer any of your question?
How much stuff do you guys deploy via ongoing policies versus self-service? How much are you giving your users the choice to install stuff on their system versus?
Good question. So what's the balance between ongoing policies that just happen in the background and self-service policies? 50-50, I think. It's a difficult choice. I think every single time we decide to do anything with Casper, we talk about what's the most helpful way to do this. And sometimes the answer is not do it for them. Sometimes it is do it for them. And I think that'll change over time. So with the deciding factor, part of it is perception. Part of it is this going to feel like encroaching on their autonomy? Sometimes the answer is no. In fact, with the bash exploit and the Firefox update, what we discovered is the line is probably closer to them than we usually draw it. We usually draw the line at don't touch, don't push, try not to do anything to those computers. Number one, we can break it and we don't mean to. Number two, it's helpful for us to be able to say that's our approach so that they appreciate that approach. But I think we're finding that we can draw that line a little closer now that everybody's sort of I hope, very comfortable with our approach to Casper and to helping them with their computers, that there are times when we can do it for them that it's a relief, that we don't have to send that email that's saying, update your Flash plugin. All you have to do is go to the Apple menu, down to System Preferences, hit the Flash button, go to Advanced because updating Flash is advanced. And then just stop all of your browsers. Like, we can actually help with that. So yeah, I think the biggest factor is, is there a way for it to be viewed as helpful, or is there the chance that it will either break or encroach on their autonomy? Nuanced. It's not nearly as black and white as I'd love it to be, but it's fun. What do you think? Nice.
Given the culture that you described, do you have a policy or stance on OS upgrades, especially when they're free, when they come out, people want them right away?
Yes. So the question is, do we have a policy on OS upgrades when they come out? When it was 10.8 was the first free one, right? I think so with 10.7 was an easy one for us. Apple would announce it and it wasn't going to be free, so it gave us some breathing room to figure out what was going on. And so we all sat down, and 50 or 60 people from Tumblr will sit down for these announcements at Apple. We put it up on the big screen. And so the IT team is sitting in the back. We're watching this happen, and they announced, and it's going to be free, and you can download it in 5 minutes. And we were terrified. We had no idea that was going to happen, and we did not have Casper at that point. It was fairly smooth sailing. There was a problem with our VPN client, which was impactful. When 10.9 came out, we did have Casper, and we opted not to prevent people from installing it. That, in retrospect, so we're a heavy user of Keynote. And Keynote went from a flat file format to a bundled format back to a flat file format. And when it went to a bundled format, all of our Box users, our entire sales team was using Box at that point, suffered unmeasurable pain. Because they would attach these things to email, and Gmail would send off a little tiny file that looks just like the real deal with none of its contents. And they were corrupting their Keynote documents with these bundles. And so we had to tell everybody how to zip their files. When 10.9 came out, I think a lot of people at Tumblr probably know when OS updates come out. I don't know about a majority, but a lot. It sort of spreads, and everybody's pretty excited about it. They're fairly savvy, but they're also extremely busy people. So spending 45 minutes to an hour updating your OS isn't that compelling for everybody, except 10.9 came with the new version of Keynote that fixed the bundle format problem. And so we sent out an email saying, okay, everybody, hold off. We're taking measure of this. Don't worry about it. Then a couple days later, I came to JNUC, because that's when it was. And by the time I got back, the entire sales team had upgraded to 10.9 to fix this problem. They all just told each other, oh my God, it finally fixes it. Da, da, da. And they don't read their emails. So in retrospect, that I think would have been a really good opportunity for us to employ the restricted software. Don't let them install it yet. It was a balancing act. We really don't want to get in people's way. But I think we could have saved them some pain, because there was a lot of, wait, you have the new version? No, I don't have the, how do you get the new version? A lot of confusion, a lot of frustration. This time we also didn't, with El Capitan, we did not restrict the installation. We're trying this one out. So far there aren't any bumps. But this time we are actually getting email notifications when people do. And this time we're not seeing a lot of self-upgrades. So I think the Keynote was a big driver of the last one, and this time it just hasn't been true. I know some large organizations who will remain nameless that do restrict that, and I think even at Tumblr that would fly. If we told everybody, hey, just to avoid confusion and frustrations, this isn't going to work yet. And we put up a nice window when that happens saying, not yet, reach out to us, let us know if you need this, and we'll accept you. But I think we could put comms around that let everybody know, we got your back. Don't do this yet.
Just a question. When you were doing the initial rollout, I saw that you chose to do the big app package. Why that rather than self-enroll?
Oh, excellent question. I didn't get into that. I did a talk I gave a little while ago. Why not self-enroll? Why do we just use the quick add package? That had a lot to do with our technical debt. So at that point, in theory, we had receipts for every computer that we'd ever bought. But figuring out what our fleet really looked like, I think it could have been done some other way. I'm not sure. So for our rollout was also an opportunity to do a full inventory of the fleet. And we were worried with self-enrollment and a staff who really just loves to solve their own problems and get going, that they would ignore the part where we said, don't enroll your home computer just to get the VPN software, whatever it was. It'd be a good problem to have. I'm glad you find it useful, but we really needed this to be a full inventory too. So that was the big reason why we didn't do self-enrollment. Boy, that would have been nice. So I really wish we'd had our ducks in a row before that, but we didn't.
You mentioned you had a really great relationship with your InfoSec team. I guess we passed that. How do you balance an InfoSec team that, say, wants to take away admin rights for everybody with users who, it sounds like, you'd be shocked if you tried to do something like that?
So how do you balance an InfoSec team that wants to go to extremes, take away admin, I call them extremes, take away admin privileges and lock things down, with the other end of the spectrum, which is the people that actually run your company, that do the stuff, that want to be able to do this stuff? That's a very difficult question to answer. At the moment, I'm blessed. I'm really lucky because so the people that work on our security team, they take a very big picture look at security. It can be, if you're down in the trenches and you're worried that, oh geez, admin privileges means that they're going to be able to install anything. If they can install anything, then they can install malware. If they install malware like that, it's very easy to go down that path and justify locking stuff down. That path doesn't end anywhere other than shutting the computer off and locking it in a safe, though. You've got to pick some place down here where you say, okay, fine, I'm willing to live with this person actually touching the computer. You know what I mean? Like, where in that spectrum do you want to make that decision? And I think I haven't really had to make these arguments with our team because, again, they really look at big picture stuff. But trying to, I don't know how you lecture your security team because they're not going to take it. But password policies, I think, is a really good one. The classic is it's got to be at least 8 characters or 10 characters, and it's going to have upper and lower and special character and all that. I've had a brilliant conversation with our security team where they're telling us something that I fully agree with, which is you get more entropy from your password if you make it longer with fewer special characters. So if you make everyone have a 12-character password, but you don't care what characters are in it, it's better than an 8-character password with an exclamation point in it, in terms of entropy. Not only that, it's also easy to remember. Like a sentence it's infinitely better than, I've got a pound sign and a 3 and an uppercase letter. So that kind of bigger thinking is part of it. But again, I can't, if their job is security and you're from the IT team trying to tell them so you could be more secure, that's tough. Yeah, I don't know how I would do that. Oh, hi.
Just wondering if you had any problems with adware at the company, and you deal with that with Casper or malware bodies, or you have some virus protection?
Yeah. So how do we deal with malware? Are we impacted by malware, and how do we deal with it? So for the 2 years that I was pitching Casper, that was one of my largest arguments. I didn't know. I had no idea. But I did know that the social engineering around some of these installers is sophisticated enough to fool me. There was one a while ago that, I'm sure it's still around, where it looks just like your Flash is out of date window. I would almost fall for that, and I do this all of the time. I'm sure some of my engineers and some of my creative types have done that. I just didn't know. And Casper finally gave us a look at that. And what we found is, I'm trying to remember now, about 10%, roughly about 10% of our Macs had some kind of adware, basically. And that was alarming to everybody except me. Macs are secure, and yeah. So with Casper, we did very rudimentary at first. We had one very specific malware that we were looking for. So we did a hash of one of the files that we knew about, and we had Casper as an extension attribute. This is brutal, but we had it do a find on the whole hard drive and hash any file that matched the right name and then report back. And our inventory went from like 1 or 2 minutes to like 5 or 6 minutes with CPU going the whole time. So we stopped doing that. And now we just started playing with something called Knock Knock. Knock Knock has a Python script that you can run. It is a Python script and a bunch of other stuff. And so we're just about to roll this out. Knock Knock looks for anything that persists on Mac. It looks at your launch agents and your launch statements and your startup items, actually, but a few other things that persist, and just does a dump of it. And you can dump it in human-readable format or JSON format. And so we're going to set up a launch daemon that runs that on a regular basis and dumps it to a file that an extension attribute can curl. So we'll have actually a JSON dump of all of the things that persist. And then our security team has access to the API so that they can pull that and start doing differentials, what's changed on workstations recently. And then we don't have antivirus. ClamAV is installed, but I don't think we've probably used it a couple of times. But and then we have some, I don't remember the name of it, adware removal tool that we use per workstation when we have a problem. That's the extent of it right now. What's that? It is adware medic, right? Okay, yep. Oh, excellent. That's an upgrade. All right.
We have time for just
One more question, all right.
Was it easier to sell management on the idea of using Casper, and did cost become a factor in that discussion at all? Is there any shyness about the cost of licensing and additional hardware that you need for a testing environment?
Testing environment, yes, we have one of those. So the question was, and correct me if I'm wrong, was budget a concern when trying to pitch management?
That was part of it mostly, yeah.
And did I miss a part of it?
Was that the hardest hurdle you had to get over, or was it as you said, the shyness about using management product in general?
Oh, great question. So how did budget and the shyness about adopting the platform compare? How do they meet in the discussion? Was for example, budget a bigger concern or less of a concern? That changed through the 2 years that I was pitching it. In the early days, it was very easy for somebody to say, oh, but that's really expensive, and that would shut down the conversation. I don't think that that was the biggest concern, though. I think it was a real easy go-to, and a valid go-to, to justify the expense. In retrospect, I'm pretty positive that the real challenge was convincing them that this was actually a great fit, not a poor fit for our organization, the way we wanted to work. But it's a great question, I think, because it was difficult to pull those apart. I thought I was fighting the budget questions for a long time and discovered I don't think I was really fighting budget questions. I was never going to win by convincing them it was cheap, even if it was, because underneath that was this unspoken worry. Thank you, everybody. This is great.